Hey everybody, my name is Nick Ravel, and I play viola, and I created DragonScales. There they are. How pretty. For violin, viola, and cello in all keys, it's a 3-octave scale and arpeggio audio play-along system that I use pretty much every day. I am a Grammy-nominated violist and public quartet. I've got loads of albums, and I'm always practicing. And I gotta say, I think DragonScales is really helpful for targeting pitch and rhythm. And I found it so useful in my own experiments that now I've made it available for you. So if you're new to DragonScales, I'll leave a fun video link in the description telling you all about it, where to get it, etc. And if you're here because you know about DragonScales, welcome to the third video in the tutorial series, How to Get the Most Out of DragonScales. In the past videos, we covered the basics, major and minor. We covered the advanced scales, the whole tone, the 2 diminished scales, and the chromatic scale. And today we're going to be talking about arpeggios, harmonies, chords in general, why I included them in the book, how I organized them in the book, and why I think they're useful. So today let's rosin that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because there's more videos coming, and let's jump right in. Here's why I think arpeggios are important. As bowed string players, we can play a maximum of 2 notes at the same time because of the curved bridge and our flat bow hair. There's crazy videos where people take their hair off the bow and they put the stick under and they bow on all 4 strings, but that's not this video. You can also kind of roll chords. You can arpeggiate chords with your bow. And you can sort of imply harmonies by using tricks. That's a lot more notes than just 2. But other instruments like piano, guitar, and harp can play a lot more notes at the same time. And so for this reason, I think bowed string instruments are generally considered melodic instruments, while those other instruments are considered harmonic instruments. Both sets can do either, but the bow just lends itself to sustained single notes, really. And because of that, at least in my experience, and I think a lot of string players, we generally think melodically. We think from one note to the next. And we're not always so great about making sure we're hearing the verticality of the harmonies, meaning the stack of notes that it's happening, probably in the piano part, or like in Bach's case, the sort of implied harmonies that we're not actually playing all the time, we just are supposed to be thinking. And so I think that playing arpeggios, if we can really hear the combined sound of all 3 notes in an arpeggio, we're then training ourselves to hear harmonically. And that's a really good thing because it gives us context for the melodic notes. For example, if I just play this sort of simple little 2-note bit, E to B, okay, it's fine, you know. It's a little empty maybe. Maybe you're already thinking of a harmony, but like if I go like this, there's more context there. I can now shape the sound sort of a little bit more emotionally based. Or if it's like this, all of a sudden it's a completely different experience. So I think the harmonic context really can inform how we play melodic notes, which is what we are so good at. And I think arpeggios is the first place to start doing that. And then physically, arpeggios are teaching us how to get around the instrument very quickly. You know, instead of putting our fingers down and walking around on the instrument, we're jumping around on the instrument. And so it's teaching us how to use our body in that way. You know, are we balanced? Can we feel breath? Are we feeling the arm, hand, finger connections at all times? And so that's why I think arpeggios are really important. So let's jump into the theory of some of these arpeggios. Here's the notation. This is the viola version. Of course, there's violin and cello versions as well. We're in the key of D. And so all of these arpeggios start on the note D. Let's zoom in, and per key, well, throughout the book, really, the progression of all 10 harmonies is the same. So we're going to go into exactly what that progression is. Each new harmony in the progression only differs from the previous harmony by 1 half step. And I set it up that way so that it kind of slowly morphs through these harmony changes. Starting with minor. And what I like to think about in the minor is we're in root position. It's actually not a lot of root position chords in this book. That's terrible looking. Let's try that again. So root position is when the root is also the bass, and the bass is the lowest note. So it's a D minor chord. The D is in the bass, and if we stacked all the notes in the 1 octave, it would look like that, kind of. My handwriting's terrible. And then we have the 3rd in the middle and the 5th on the top. So 3 and 5. And then that repeats per octave. Got the same thing here, but in a different octave. And then 1 more, and then it comes back down. The next harmony is almost the same. It's just the A, the 3rd note in the D minor arpeggio, transforms into a B flat. So now we're here, and we're here. And you can see there's sort of a bigger space between the 2nd and the 3rd notes. The bass note is still D, but the root is now at the top because we're technically in a B flat major chord. And that actually sounds really different to my ears. There's your D minor, and then it's like brighter all of a sudden, right? So that's that 1 half step makes a big difference. And playing it in first inversion, which we'll talk about in a second, sounds really different to me than playing it in root position. So that's why I think these inversions are really interesting. I like to think of them as like buildings, where your lobby is your root. And in the case of the D minor, the first floor is the lobby. In the case of this inversion, the B flat major, you've got 2 basements below the lobby, and the B flat is your lobby. So you're still thinking of the B flat as like the home base, kind of the gathering place, the place where it's actually sort of happening. And then you've got these other notes that are down below. This one in particular is the augmented chord. I find it incredibly awkward. Just like last week, we were talking about whole tone scales. You can make a augmented chord from a whole tone scale. And the reason why it's awkward is because you have no more perfect fifths. So you can't put your finger parallel across the string. If you could, it would just be D major. Super awkward. And so that's why we practice them, because in a lot of music, it's not just major and minor chords, right? So that's the augmented chord. That's in root position. Here we have the minor 6 chord in an inversion. And, you know, you can see it goes on and on. I think we should talk quickly about what these Roman numerals mean. Some people know what Roman numerals are, some people don't. Basically, the Roman numerals are attributed to scale degrees. So, in the case of our first chord, we have a lowercase I, or 1, which means this chord is going to be minor because it's lowercase, and it's going to be built on the first scale degree in the key of D. So it's a minor chord starting on D. It's a D minor chord. In D minor, well, we're not really in minor, but we're not really in major either. We're just in D. We're saying D is the root. So in this case, we have a B flat major chord. And if you were to somehow put that into a scale starting on D, it would be the 6th note, right? And so that's why it's got the Roman numeral 6. The 6 is capitalized because it's major, and it's flat because it implies a B flat. we don't know if we're in D minor or D major, but it's a flat 6 chord. And then this little number 6 by the Roman numeral 6 implies that the interval between the bass note and the root note is a 6th. That's how we know what inversion we are. That's what we know how to spell it. So that's what the little 6 means. This little plus sign means augmented, so it's a 1 chord, so starting on D plus augmented. So it's D, F sharp, and A sharp. The augmented refers to the 5th. So the 5th is being raised by a half step from A natural. We have our minor 6/6 chord. So that means that we're in a B minor chord, and B is our root, and it's a minor chord, so it's lowercase Roman numeral 6, and the little number 6 again means that between the bass note and the root we have an interval of a 6th. Okay, so that's how we know that. Going right along, we have a major 4/6/4, and 6/4 just means that in this case we have sort of a fourth between the bass and the root being G. So it's actually a G major chord with the bass note being D. So that's how you know it's not a regular, first inversion chord. It's the second inversion chord when you have the 4 under the 6. That's how you know. And the same thing, it's minor this time. Sus chord in a lot of music, especially classical and then pop and jazz music, the sus chord usually resolves to a major chord, or to the chord of the sort of root chord. And so in this case, the G is the suspension. Sus stands for suspension. So above the D is a G, and that's what the 4 means. And then you see, if we're going to kind of trace it from that G down, we can see that it resolves to the F sharp. And that's how it sort of sounds like this. So we have our... and then of course we have our fully diminished 7th chord. This is can be made from the diminished scale, which we talked about last week. And again, it's awkward because there's no perfect fifths. So you have to sort of wiggle your way across the string. Sort of the dastardly villain music from like those silent movies where the guy had the handlebar mustache, real evil. And then the dominant 7th, that's sort of just a standard chord. We all need to know the dominant 7th chord. I did not include trichords, which is sort of a more 20th century 12-tone theory term that just means any group of 3 notes, because I think there's like 55 unique trichords. It's just too many, and a lot of them are covered by the triads that I've put in there. And there's also a bunch of 7th chords. I could have done major, minor, half diminished, major, minor, all these things. But maybe that's an idea for another book, DragonScales 3.0, if you will. Let me know if you're interested in that, and maybe I'll make it happen. So here's what the actual progression sounds like, just 1 octave at a time. And then faster. Set your rhythmic limit. Okay, so that's sort of the theory behind it. And I think that wraps up that section. How to practice. Let's go back to the main view here. How to practice. You put the tracks on and you go. Wrong. You first need to see if you're hearing the harmonies. As I was saying earlier, these separate consecutive notes in the arpeggios, we play them that way because of our bowed string instruments. You know, we're good at sustaining notes. We're not good at playing a lot of notes at once. So think of them as stacks. Can you do that? Can you play the arpeggio in a stack? And one way you can do that is if you can sing it. If you can sing it, you can play it. If you can't sing it, you might not be able to play it. I used to be so embarrassed about singing, even in the solitude of my own practice room. I don't know what it is about us string players and not wanting to sing, but I see it a lot, and I see it definitely in my own students. I've had to battle that by including some singing in like the music that we write in public quartet. So I have learned how to sing in public. I'm sort of over the singing fear, but I'm going to ruin my career right now by demonstrating how to sing these. And let's just make it silly. If you're taking yourself too seriously, use a syllable that's just over the top silly. It makes it much more fun. I'm going to use blork. So I'm going to sing these these chords on blork. Blork, 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 minor. Blork, blork, blork. Blork, 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 blork. I was a little sharp on that. Blork, 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 etc., etc. You get the idea. I don't think we need to, listen to me sing blork all day. But that's how you know. And so you'll hear like, oh, I didn't hit that note. Some of those notes I didn't hit. And then you can practice singing them until you really hear them, until you really focus on the intonation. And then once you've done that, you're ready to put the tracks on and play. Wrong. You need a fingering first. So I'll show you what I do for fingering. Basically, this is my opinion. You can do whatever fingering you want. But I found the easiest way to navigate this whole thing is to always shift to 1 on the new octave. So for example, we have our 1, 3, 1, I shift to 1. 3, 1, I shift to 1, 3, 1. We don't shift because that's the end of the road. Turn back. And here we play a 1 and we shift down to where we came from. 3, 1, and then shift. So we're just sort of backing up the truck. And I do the same thing in the next arpeggio, except, instead of a 1 here, it's a 2, and then I shift, go all the way up and down that way. That's just the way I do it. I find it easier, and, I find it easier to remember the fingering, and I find it effective because you're practicing sort of the hand shape, but in a different range on your instrument, and that feels really different. Like the spacing is different. And so I like to sort of map out the same fingering to different spatial configurations. That's just how I like to do it. Pick your own fingering. Now you're actually ready. You can put on the tracks and go. Why don't we do that? Let's demo how this sounds. Here we go. D minor arpeggios 1. Love that sound. It can be grating, but it gives you really clear pitch. So that's why I use that sound in the DragonScales. Now you might be wondering what's up with the version 1, version 2. So version 1, let's go back for a second. Version 1, you move through all the harmonies per rhythm set. So you start slow, do the whole thing, get faster, do the whole thing, get faster. In version 2, you move through the entire rhythmic progression before you move on to the next harmony. And I find these two ways, although they're all exactly the same notes and rhythms, just the fact that they're paced in these ways, in these different ways, makes them feel very different when you're practicing. So for example, if you really want to just get good at the minor arpeggio, maybe you want to do arpeggios version 2 instead of version 1. And as I said before, I keep saying it, set your rhythmic limit, particularly in the arpeggios. That 6-tuplet at the end of the series goes freaking fast. I can't really play them. They're super challenging. The viola rep, I'm not sure it really lends itself to that kind of pyrotechnics. Maybe I should be able to play them. I can usually do them in this version 2, format, but in the version 1, it's just an onslaught of very fast notes. The violin rep maybe kind of does lend itself to that sort of playing. And so maybe that's appropriate for you. But make sure in any case you set your rhythmic limit and don't go on past what you can do. Okay, I think, check my notes here. I think that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks so much for sticking around. I really hope you find this stuff useful. You know, like I said before, there's possible revisions, there's possible next steps with this. And so I'd love to hear from you. How are you using DragonScales? How are you practicing arpeggios? Do you hear harmonically? Do you hear horizontally, melodically? And what would you like to see in the future? The next couple videos coming up include getting creative with DragonScales, how to basically not play in unison with it. That might be a couple videos. And improvising with DragonScales, making up grooves, rhythms, patterns, etc. That also might be a couple videos. And possibly double stops, depending on if I can figure out how to play double stops by then. So again, thanks so much. Rosin the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for being here. Happy practicing.